Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome to a brand new movie review. I'm Chris Garner, joined today with my co-host Tom Woods to give our review on the 2017 supernatural horror film Annabelle Creation. I was going to call that The Conjuring 2 then. That's not what we're talking about. Annabelle Creation, directed by David F. Sandberg, which is the spin-off to the Conjuring films and sequel/prequel to the 2014 original Annabelle movie. Kind of like our review on The Dark Tower, which was me and Tate. This is going to be slightly different than usual. So out of the two of us, I'm the only one that's seen this movie. So Tom will be firing questions at me with the intention of hopefully going to see the film himself and just asking me general questions. But I'll also be giving my overall opinion on the film as well. So before I go into my thoughts on this one, I'm going to pass over to you. What were your thoughts on the Conjuring films? I think we actually did a review together, didn't we, of the Conjuring 2?
Yeah, on the Conjuring 2, yeah.
The first Annabelle film, if you've even seen that one.
See, Annabelle was a film I skipped, mainly because, you know, we saw the origin story in The Conjuring. So why did we need an entire film based on that? I liked the first Conjuring film. Really liked it, in fact. The second one, yeah, it was. I think I included it on my. What bracket was it that I included it on?
It was the best films that we'd reviewed, was it?
Yeah. Thinking back to it, I think I gave it a harsher review than possibly intended, because I do like it, and it does, you know, it does a few of the loud jump scare things more so than the original, but I think it still holds up as a generally well-made horror film, and probably one of my favorite. Well, not really one of my favorites in the last year or so. That's for sure. And yeah, like I said, I missed Annabelle, so I don't really.
Yeah, I was kind of in the same boat with you on this one. So I watched The Conjuring when it came out, and I loved it. And if someone asked me of a good modern horror film, then The Conjuring, the first one is usually one I always go back to. Still did like the second one, kind of did pale in comparison to me to the first one, but I still think it did have some very creative scares in there. I too skipped the original Annabelle film before I went. Well, actually, I did watch it before going to see this new one because I wanted to be caught up. But I mean, in the years that it's been out since 2014, so for 3 years, I have skipped this one pretty much for exactly the same reason you did. They tell the Annabelle backstory in like the first 5 minutes of The Conjuring, and that's all you need. The doll isn't integral to the plot. It's like a background character, sort of sets you up into this world and the kind of scares that you're about to witness. And also because James Wan, the director, just has you know, a fear of dolls, so he always puts like a creepy doll in most of his films, apart from Fast and Furious 7. There wasn't one in that.
It would have been great if the Annabelle doll just came into that. It was somehow controlling Dom.
It's like the henchman of Jason Statham or something. I'd love that. So yeah, I skipped Annabelle, and also because around the time, this was before we were doing like film reviews and things like that. If I saw a review of a film and it said that it wasn't very good, usually I didn't go and see it. Now I'll go and see it just to give my own opinion on it anyway, or to get something out for the channel. And I didn't hear too many glowing reviews of the first Annabelle film when it came out. And in all honesty, let's be honest, it was just made for purely financial gain. The Conjuring was a big success. They didn't want to just wait until Conjuring 2, so they thought they could just keep pumping them out. And that's exactly what they're still doing with Annabelle Creation. And we've also got the Nun spin-off, which was the character of Valak from Conjuring 2. So I think these spin-offs are here to stay at this point.
Yeah.
But so the first Annabelle film, I'll give my thoughts on that. I will get to Annabelle Creation in a moment, I promise, guys. It was bad. It was really bad. The acting was absolutely atrocious. And the scares were all jump scares. I don't think there was any genuine tension, build-up, atmosphere. And I sound like a broken record at this point because we always talk about this when we do horror films, that my favorite kind of horror films are ones that build a sense of dread, an atmosphere. Kubrick's The Shining, even elements of the original Conjuring film did that very well. I understand the need for jump scares, and if a jump scare is placed well, then it can be earned. But Annabelle, it was just jump scares all the way through, and it just felt like a movie that didn't need to be made. Also, the concept of this family buying this horrific-looking doll even before it's been possessed and playing it off like it's the greatest like relationship gift ever. And it's like, oh, thank you. That's just what I've always wanted. It's like this 5-foot demonic-looking doll like that you'd never buy. You look past all that, it was just a really forgettable movie. This one, however, I kept away from all the trailers, and I really only went to see this one just to get a review out for the channel. And I went to see this last week, actually, so my mind might be a little bit hazy on it. But I was actually taken aback of how enjoyable this movie was. I'd hold this up right next to the first Conjuring film, and I'd have to see The Conjuring 2 again. I think I'd still give The Conjuring 2 the edge just because I really like Patrick Wilson and is it Vera Farmiga as the one? Yeah. I really like their performance and just really nice characters. And this film didn't quite have that level of connection I had to the characters for this one. But in terms of its visual style, it's leaps and bounds better than the first Annabelle film. The scares are better. It's better orchestrated. The cinematography, just everything about it. There were some genuine moments of horror in this film. Now, it does kind of... This will be spoiler-free, by the way. I'll go into spoilers later on. As the film ramps up, and I guess this is like most modern horror, the jump scares do become more and more. And it kind of gets a little bit irritating towards the end because of that. But there are still some great moments in this film. And I saw it with a packed crowd, and horror films are always best when you see it with a packed crowd, unless you've got some really annoying person munching popcorn to the left or right of you, which thankfully I didn't have.
Yeah.
But it's also the case of, you know, we've seen it all before. And that's kind of like the Conjuring films as well. It's a creepy well with, you know, a young, like, bedraggled-haired girl coming out of it. There's the creepy doll. There's the creaking doors, slamming doors, lights going out, you know, things like that. There's even a scene where there's, like, a witch-like character that vomits black goo into someone's mouth as they're stood over them, which I've seen in about 3 or 4 other horror movies at this point. So there's ingredients of this film which do feel very been there, done that. But nonetheless, David F. Sandberg does make it feel organic to the Conjuring franchise. There's a few hints in the films as well that do link it to future spin-offs that they're going to do and tie it back into the original ones, which, you know, I kind of could have done without. I think it's kind of like the case of Wonder Woman. If you trim off like a minute or 2 off the end of this film, you've got a perfect standalone movie that, in all honesty, could be just the only origin movie of the Annabelle doll. If we even needed one in the first place. But no, general consensus, I really, really enjoyed this movie. Great horror film.
Well, that kind of surprises me because you said you know, the first one was crap. I wasn't expecting you to like this one.
Yeah, neither was I. I was just as surprised as you were, to be honest.
But how? Yeah. One thing. How does it fit into the rest of the universe they've sort of created for the Conjuring films and you know, the Annabelle spin-offs that they've got?
Okay, so I won't be able to go too in depth in this because there are some tie-ins that I wanted to save for spoilers. But it's set in 1943, so as I said, this is a prequel to the original Annabelle film, and it shows the actual, as the title suggests, the actual creation of the doll. The film begins where you've got this family with a daughter, and he's a toy maker, he's a doll maker, and he's making the Annabelle dolls. I think he says it's like 1 of 100. So hopefully we won't get like another 98 of these films or anything like that.
Army of Annabelle dolls.
Yeah. Oh, it'll happen. Get to the 3rd one. And basically an accident befalls the girl, and then she finds a way to channel into the doll, or is it really the spirit of the girl? And that's kind of the main plot of this film. In terms of where it fits into the first Annabelle film, there is a moment where the 2 films do merge.
Right.
Or at least there's some connective tissue there which kind of ties everything together. That's mostly towards the end, though. And there are some little moments in the film which do tie it to the next spin-off film they're going to do with the nun. There was a few people, you could tell the people that were very integrated into this series of films because you could hear like gasps and like people pointing at the screen when a certain entity shows up in the film. But no, I thought it tied it very well. But it is mostly its own thing. It's really only in the last 5 minutes or so where it does tie into the first one, which I guess, well, I don't even think they needed to do that, but I think that was just to appease the fans of the first Annabelle film, if there are any out there. I'm sure there are. And just to say that, yes, that is still in keeping with this continuity in this story.
And how does the directorial aspect hold up? Is it well directed? Does Sandberg bring something different, something new to an existing franchise?
I would say he definitely does. Cinematography wise and just cinematically, it looks really impressive. He gets very creative with the camera and the scares in this one. Really nice established shot. The first one just felt so run of the mill, really bland. And actually, this guy directed. We were both talking about this before we hit record. There's a short film. I think it's still on YouTube called Lights Out, which was a very creepy, very effective little short movie that was made by him. I think it was one of the first things he ever made. I think it was the second thing he actually made, one of his short films. And then he got that turned into an actual movie, which was apparently terrible. I haven't seen it myself, but I have not heard good things about it. So going pretty much just from that short film alone, I knew that this was a guy that could do effective horror. Maybe it was the studio that got involved or other people, which, changed his idea. I don't really know the ins and outs.
Yeah.
But it is impressive to look at. But it does feel like, James Wan's always going to be the creator of the Conjuring franchise for me. And it does feel like he is trying to chase some of those moments that James Wan did. And I would still say that James Wan is a little bit more effective with that overall, if I'm going to look at the films in general, how they're crafted, how they're paced and things like that. But the ingredients are there. This felt very much more like a Conjuring film than the first Annabelle film did. And I think that's why I gravitated towards it a little bit more.
Yeah. All right. So that's the directing sort of out of the way. How is it acted? Do the actors bring good performances to it? I know Miranda Otto is in this.
Yeah.
The first thing in years that I think I've probably heard that she's been in. But how do the actors perform? Because I know usually acting in horror films is kind of really shit.
Mm-hmm.
But is it better than most?
Definitely. The main two, for example, the main girl in it, you've kind of got two main girls in it that the protagonists. So you've got Janice and Linda, and I actually think that Janice was the name of the girl from Conjuring 2 as well? It's kind of weird how we've got two protagonists with the same name. God, I can't remember that far back. But Talitha Bateman and Lulu Wilson, one's 15, one's 11, and they were phenomenal. Like, they acted rings around pretty much everyone else in the film. Not to say that everyone else is bad, but they were definitely the standout. You believe that they were scared, that they were possessed, whatever it happens to be in the film. They really did bring it, and that's why I think I liked it a lot more, is that I did like these characters, not as much as the ones from The Conjuring, as I've said before, but in terms of its own film, I did really like these characters hell of a lot more than the first Annabelle film. Like, any of those could have got picked off or died in the first 5 minutes, I would not have cared. But with any good horror film, like, you want to see them get out of it. You want to see them get out of the situation. You've also got side characters in there. You've got Anthony LaPaglia, who is the father of the family, who, the father of the deceased girl, the Annabelle. The premise of the film, I should go into the plot a bit to give this film a bit of context, but basically after the death of their daughter, he opens their home up as a kind of orphanage or halfway house kind of thing, boarding house. And a nun goes there, Sister Charlotte, played by Stephanie Sigman, who goes there with about 6 girls, and that's the initial setup for the movie. But no, all the performances were great, and the Miranda Otto thing, I was watching the whole movie, and I knew her from somewhere. And I get this with the movies a lot, and I couldn't place it the entire film. And I got the biggest shock of my life when I saw Miranda Otto's name going up in the credits. Like, obviously, Eowyn from The Lord of the Rings, that's where I know the most. But I think the last movie I saw of her was in 2004, which was War of the Worlds, where she played Tom Cruise's ex-wife. Yeah. And I think that is honestly the last film I've seen her. So it's been a good, 13 years since I've seen her in anything.
You probably did recognize
kind of
her
rocking
because she had the mask.
She's got the Phantom of the Opera mask going on throughout the movie, which I'll get into spoilers in a minute, which that kind of all comes to head. Actually leads to a really genuinely creepy moment. There's a few characters in the film as well. You've got some like older girls in the group that are probably about 16, 17, 18, something like that. And it does feel like they're written to... We're introduced to the characters and it's like, oh, go away, we're talking about boys, that kind of thing. It does feel very, like a middle-aged man's trying to write for an 18-year-old girl, as what his perceptions of what an 18-year-old girl would say. But they're fine. There's a few plot threads involving the characters. For example, it focuses on one of these older girls later on where she finds herself in a barn as like all hell's breaking loose. And it kind of lingers on this scene and you're expecting some kind of payoff and the payoff never happens. And it just feels like they were stalling for time a little bit or just trying to get some more creative scares in there. But in terms of the performances, I didn't really have a bad one. I thought everyone was fine.
Okay, so what would you say out of, if you had to pick, say, let's say 3 things from the film that you would say are faults, and you can only pick 3. What would they be? What would be the worst things, worst aspects of the film that you'd say?
The worst aspects for me, and this is just me with horror, I think they could have gone subtler in some moments. And I know that with horror film, it has to be a sense of escalation, like it has to build up to some kind of finale.
Yeah.
However, if you show the thing, not literally the thing, I'm not talking about John Carpenter's movie. If you show whatever's haunting people or possessing people in full, it immediately takes the scare away from me. The fear of the unknown is what I think, when this movie starts off, is what's really effective. And there's a lot of scares in the movie, especially jump scares, that I think that if I was doing that, I wouldn't have put a jump scare there. I'd have just kept that tension building. Sometimes like silence or stillness can be even more creepy than just bang, loud orchestra sting and everyone jumps because it's startling. So I would say that there's a few too many jump scares in the film, for me at least. I think they could have gone subtler in some aspects. The fact that by the end of the film, it does feel very been there, done that. And I talked about the familiar ingredients, which is fine because there's only so many things you can do in a horror movie. But by the end, you kind of do clock on of where it's going, how it's all going to end, things like that. So it does get very predictable in that regard.
Okay.
And really, my only other negative is, unfortunately, it does still tie into the first Annabelle film. So you still technically do have to watch the first Annabelle film before this one for the ending to make sense, at least. I think it'd still make perfect sense if you did just watch this one on its own.
All right.
But I think they were just beholden by the studio to throw some kind of reference in there. I am actually really struggling to think of any negatives, like all-out film-breaking negatives, which I don't really have. I thought it was a great time. I don't know if it'd be one of the best horror films I've seen in recent years. For example, I still think that maybe The Babadook is a better film, although I've only watched that once. Certainly the other 2 Conjuring films, as I said. I'm trying to think of any other good horror films I've seen recently. Maybe The Witch as well. Maybe The Witch might be slightly better. Certainly more atmospheric than this one. But this movie does have its moments, and that's why I can't come down like thunder on this movie, because it does have great moments in there.
See, now I kind of want to see it, because you like it, and it makes me curious, because I've heard it's got mixed reviews, somewhat mixed reviews. Some saying it delivers some good scares, others saying the plot doesn't really hold up and the film doesn't hold up to the James Wan directed entries. But you've piqued my interest.
There's certainly some moments in there which I think there were negatives that I had with Conjuring 2 as well, where someone will be getting like thrown against a wall by a ghost or something very loud will be happening. People will be screaming, but everyone seems to just sleep like the grave throughout the rest of the house, and no one comes to like rescue them or anything. You know, like I think we had problems with that in Conjuring 2, where it was the family house, things were happening, and it'd take about 5 or 10 minutes before the mum gets out of bed and hears something going on. There were some moments like that. And there were plenty of times where I was just thinking, you know, you could easily just call a cab right now or get a car to pick you all up and drive away as soon as you can. But for some reason, we have to stay here because this this creepy family is really nice, and they've been charitable and good Christians and taken us in, so we should be respectful of that. So there's moments like that where it's like, okay, we need to keep these characters in isolation in this situation. But if you can look past that, then it's just a really enjoyable horror film. Like, certainly a cut above the rest of most of the ones that come out. I'll just say that, because I do love the horror genre, but at this point, I thought it was a dead genre, really. Just certainly like the horror films of like the 70s or the 80s.
Right.
And I don't think horror films will ever quite get to that stage again, unfortunately. But I did really enjoy this movie. And I think it's doing fairly well on...
it is.
Well. I'm just having a look now. Oh, it's sitting at 67, which, you know, is still... Oh, we seem to have lost a Tom. So I'm on the live stream by myself now, guys. This is absolutely fine. But yeah, currently on Rotten Tomatoes, it's sitting on a 67%, which is, you know, the lower end of average. But I'd give it about the 70, in all honesty.
Sorry,
You're back, Tom.
I am. I completely cut out for some bizarre reason.
Maybe it's Bagul from Sinister, which
Maybe.
is just a name I like to say because Bagul's such a dumb name.
Bagul.
Yes, so I was just saying about that it's sitting at 67% on Rotten Tomatoes right now, which is about the lower end of average.
I did hear it. It didn't stick up to, and I think that's what I was saying before I weirdly cut out. And I heard it was doing, from what I last saw, doing pretty well at the box office too.
Yeah, it was done on a budget of 15 million and it's currently sitting at 160.7 million. This is according to Wikipedia. So I think we're definitely going to get an Annabelle 3 and certainly more of these Conjuring films, which,
Right.
you know, if they're done to this standard or certainly the standard of the Conjuring films, then I'm fine with that.
Yeah. What's your spoilers?
Spoilers. Okay, so spoiler warning for Annabelle Creation. If you haven't seen this film and you are curious to check it out, go and watch it first. Sorry, Tom. I'm going to keep spoilers to as minimum as possible. It's a waste of time you going through all the scares in the film.
Yeah.
But
what I'm really interested in is kind of seeing, or your explanation of how it all ties together, and if having all those tie-ins hurts the film or makes the film better.
Oh, don't get me wrong. This isn't like a Marvel film where they're dropping a reference every 2 seconds, which takes away from the movie. They're very scattered throughout the film. There's not that many, in all honesty. The first major one is the nun. So Valak, the entity that they were trying to take down in Conjuring 2. There's a moment where we have Sister Charlotte, the nun character in the film, and she has an old picture of her at the convent with all the others. And you just see the lineup of them. And one of the girls, I think it's Janice, says like, oh, who's that on the photo? And you don't see it. And she kind of tilts the photo into the light a bit more. And it's the nun. And like, you know, that weird, is it a picture? Is it really their kind of face that was there in Conjuring 2, where you couldn't tell if it was actually in the room with them or not? It just like fades into the photo and it has the same like demonic staring eyes. So I don't know why she's never caught that out on the photo before, unless it's like a Harry Potter thing and it appears and goes when it wants to. And she's just like, oh yeah, I'm not really sure about her. And then it just like carries on. So it's really just in there to get us on board, maybe, for the nun spin-off. And there's also a post-credit scene. There's a mid-credit scene of this film and a post-credit scene. So I guess that is another Marvel comparison in that regard. The first one's just kind of a foreboding, fun last scare before the end of the movie. There's no jump scare though. There's no Bagul kind of like sliding into frame like the end of Sinister, which was awful. Can't stand that movie at all. But it was a nice lingering shot and you're like, is something going to happen? Is something going to happen? And it doesn't. And that's the kind of scares that I like. They're the subtler ones I would have liked. But the post-credit scene, we go to Romania in 1952. And the camera just sort of tracks through this church and there's all candlelight along the side. And then Valak the nun just kind of walks to camera. And that's it. Didn't really need to be there, but I guess if they are setting up some kind of franchise or, God forbid, a cinematic universe with this thing.
Well, then, they probably kind of have already.
I guess so. And, I was going to talk about the ending of this film as well, but I don't know if you want me to, which connects it into the original Annabelle film.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, how it connects into the original.
Yeah. So the very final scene is that they lock the girl in a closet with the doll, and it's a closet surrounded by Bible script, and they lock her in there, and she's screaming, and the door's pounding, and everything like that. Then it falls silent. Then the police show up, they inspect the house, they open the closet, and I believe the doll's still in there, but there's like a hole carved into the wall where Janice has escaped, possessed by the demon. We then flash forward to an orphanage where Janice has been taken in, now going under the name of Annabelle herself. And the couple that come to adopt her were the neighbors to the main couple in the first Annabelle film, who we do see in the first Annabelle film, who get murdered in like the first 10 minutes by some kind of Satan cultist.
Yeah.
And we find out in this movie at the end that Janice, who's now possessed by Annabelle, is the one who was the Satan cultist who did kill the family, so essentially killed her foster parents. So that ties it in. We get a little bit of a shot from the previous Annabelle film with the family when they go to inspect it. Then it cuts to black because essentially we know where it all plays out after that. Didn't need to be in the film, in all honesty, but if you're going to tie it in, then it's fine. But it does mean that I do have to still consider the 2014 one.
Yeah, and like you said, you hated that one. Well, yeah. I'm curious to know. What are the who are the major players and what are their roles in the film? So like for example, Miranda Otto, what does she have to do in it? What's her point to being in the film?
Yes, so Miranda Otto, she's obviously the grieving mother, and we have her husband in there, played by Anthony LaPaglia, and they're like really weathered and creepy. And we're introduced to, she's more like of a scare in the film. Like there's this sense of foreboding, like you can't go into that room where she's at. Like if she needs something, she'll ring a bell and then she'll have to have like an attendant go into her. She's always shrouded behind this net curtain and like you only see like a portion of her face. And it's genuinely creepy stuff because you are like wondering like, oh God, what's become of her? Is she the demon? Has she been possessed? Ultimately, it culminates to the end. This is where it gets a bit goofy. So after the death of their daughter, they prayed to every single god possible to bring their daughter back to them. When that failed, they turned to Satan, essentially. And go with it. So I'm just thinking about like them praying to every single god. Like, did they do Sikhism, Buddhism, Christianity? Like, just they went through the whole. But no, Satan was the one that gave their daughter back to them. And then they say that once they started worshipping Satan in this regard, they started getting glimpses of their daughter around the house. The record player would start playing. There's also like another creepy gramophone song in this film. Like I think Insidious had that with Tiptoe Through the Tulips. This is Bring Me Sunshine. So that started happening and they took comfort in that, knowing that their daughter was there. Then things started turning hostile. They realized that it probably wasn't their daughter. It was this giant 12-foot demon motherfucker. And he gouged Miranda Otto's eye out, and that's why she wears the half mask. And things don't go too well for Miranda Otto in this film. And that's all I'm going to say. People who have seen the film will know what I'm talking about.
So they let me get this straight. I've just looked this up, right? So they've prayed to all manner of gods.
Yes. So Cthulhu, everything seemingly.
Cthulhu. They in total. Let's estimate. So what it says here is that the Google has to say is that, so Hinduism being the oldest religion. Some Hindus will say there's one god with 320 million forms. So they prayed to all of them.
Yes. They had a lot of time to kill in their secluded house.
Must be like one every second or so. Just
hey, they were desperate to get their daughter back, you know. Also, this is like the morbid sense of humor in me. When the daughter dies, it's fucking hilarious. I'm sorry, I've got to say it. I shouldn't laugh, but that's just my kind of sense of humor. It was fucking hilarious. If you see the movie, Tom, like I guess I think you'll have to.
Did you laugh out loud at it?
I did. I had to stifle it because I was in a crowded house and everyone was like really shocked, and I was just like pissing myself laughing. Should I say how she goes out this film? I guess if I like explain it, it's not going to sound funny at all. It's going to make me sound like the horrible person that I am.
I think that's even better if you explain it like the horrible person you are.
Okay, so they've just been to church, Sunday church. They're driving back and they get a flat tire. So they pull the car over to the side of the road, and the dad's like, try to like undo the tire to give the replacement on, and the daughter's there with like her doll and just like playing with it, and they see a car coming down the horizon on the road, and Miranda Otto's like, maybe we can flag it down, and the husband's like, yeah, it's a great idea. So the car seems to be slowing down behind them because they're kind of blocking most of the road. It's just like a little dirt road in the middle of nowhere. and I think like a bolt or a screw falls off the tire of the car and falls into the road. And the daughter just rushes out and goes, "I'll get it for you, Daddy," and jumps into the road as the car's there. It doesn't even look like it's traveling that fast. It looks like it's like coming to a stop. Boom, cut to black. And I don't do it justice, but it was so funny how it was framed. I'm going to hell. I'm going to the same place where the demon is from this movie. I'm cool with that.
So it looked like it was going to a stop.
Yeah, it does like a whole slow motion thing of like the bolt, like boom, boom on the floor. It looks like the One Ring from Lord of the Rings. And then she just rushes out like, "I'll get it for you, Daddy." And then the car just kind of comes and just like taps her. It reminded me of the scene from Austin Powers with the steamroller.
Yeah.
It reminded me of that.
Oh God. That reminds me of don't know if you played it, Heavy Rain.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
Where he jumps in
exactly
front of the car and somehow the kid dies.
It's exactly like that. It's exactly like, oh God, I'm going to hell.
So that's one of the funnier moments of it. Was there anything else that made you like laugh out loud?
It's just I can't keep saying this because people are going to unsubscribe. I'm going to just like get kicked off the channel just making fun of people. Okay, so I can't do this. I actually can't do. Okay, right. So this isn't funny. This is I'm serious faces on now. Okay, guys. The main character in the film, Janice, has got a gammy leg because she's been hit by polio. Okay, and there's a scene where she's there and he's like showing them to all their rooms. The dad of the deceased Annabelle, and he's just really sort of like menacing and stoic and just really dismissive of everyone. So all the girls rush upstairs and go like, "I want this room, I want this room, it's the prettiest room, it's the biggest room," whatever it happens to be. And then you've got Janice, who can't move very fast, and she says, "Can I have a room downstairs? That's where the mothers kept Miranda Otto's character." And he's like, "No, you can have one upstairs." And he just seems like an absolute prick. But then he said that he had a stair lift integrated into it, so she gives it a test run, she really likes it, and she has a room upstairs. When all shit's going down and the demon's kicking off and everything like that, there's a scene where she tries to rush back downstairs. So she gets in the stair lift and starts going down very, very slowly, and she gets about halfway, stops, all the lights go out, and then all of a sudden it starts going back up the stairs. And actually it's a really effective scare in the film. It's this really, big sense of dread, like it's going up. She keeps looking up and the camera fixes on the landing and it's just pitch black and you don't know if there's anything up there or not. And it's getting closer and closer. And then I'm trying to think back because it's been a week ago. I think all the lights cut out, or she gets yanked out of the chair, like right up into the air off camera. And then it lingers on that. And then it just kind of, the camera pans back down to the floor, like all the way down from the stairs to the landing floor, and it lingers there for a few seconds, and then boom, her body just drops down and smacks down there. And I thought she was dead after a second, but there's just something about like a demon picking someone up and throwing them, especially off a staircase, that I just find wildly hilarious. This is my really warped sense of humor, guys. This is
I mean,
no holds barred review on Cinema Savvy.
It's a demon. It can do anything. Like what? Can it get so the other? Okay, here's one thing. The demon, or you said it was a demon. Yeah. Does it do things that might be considered uncharacteristic? Does it has established sort of rules that it can do? Does it follow established patterns?
Not necessarily, and I know that in the Red Letter Media they were talking about that was a fault of it. They like horror films with rules and things like that. There isn't really. We just know that it wants a body, and it goes into the doll, and then from there it lures people in and goes into them. That's about really it. In terms of its powers, it can seemingly do anything. There's a part in this film where with Conjuring 2, you had one of the silliest scares in the film, which I think everyone pretty much across the board says, which was the Crooked Man, which was the weird part where the dog morphs into this Henry Selick Nightmare Before Christmas, Jack Skellington stop-motion animation type thing. Whilst it doesn't get that ridiculous, there is like a side character in this film, as is often the case with these films, where there's a scarecrow. And it's set up at the beginning of the film where they're looking at it and you're just expecting like a head to turn or something like that. And of course it doesn't at the beginning of the film. And that's actually the moment I was referring to earlier, where you have the older one of the girls where she gets locked in this shed with this scarecrow thing.
Right.
And the demons like got into the scarecrow, I guess, and is like moving it around like a puppet. That's where it kind of gets a little bit ridiculous, I suppose. And hopefully we won't get a spin-off to the spin-off with the scarecrow or something like that. Like a really warped spin-off to Wizard of Oz or something like that. But in terms of set rules, it's really that it just wants a body and it will do anything to get it.
See, this is where this sort of stuff doesn't really get to me, or doesn't really make sense to me, because whatever your beliefs are, to me, demons don't exist, so they can do pretty much whatever they want because they are fictional. They're made up, and I think an unpredictable sort of monster in these horror films is probably better, because you don't know what it's going to do, rather than you can just pick out, oh, this is where it's going to do this and that's where it's going to do that, and oh, there's a scare here, yep, scare there. I think the unpredictableness probably it would be better than a it has these established things it can do.
Yeah, well, with things like that, I mean, I'm trying to think of an example. So John Carpenter's The Thing, it can be killed by fire. It can like take everyone over. It has a weakness. There is a way to beat it, and that it has a set pattern. That's mostly the case with 80s horror films, I would say. Mostly the slasher genre, I would say. Maybe. I don't know, because it seems like just like a relentless pursuit. But mostly like 80s horror films did have rules like that, and it gave like a complete arc, really. Like you have the main character, there's a way to beat it, they do the way to beat it, they think they've beaten it, and often the case they throw like the jump scare at the end where they're still alive. With this one, there's actually a great moment, and I think that Paranormal Activity did this as well, where as a horror genre, as a fan of horror, as a viewer of horror, you always expect the bad stuff to happen at night. And I think that's just something that gets instilled from you as a kid, like the monsters come out at night, like scary things happen in the dark. But as the film goes on, usually these scares start to come into daytime and it throws you for a loop a bit. You know that there isn't a moment where you're safe. There isn't any comfort in that daylight. So there's a moment in this film like that where we've just had this big explosive action scene, I guess horror scene, that happens at night. And then we go to the next morning and you think that everything's happy. And the sister rolls Janice out in a wheelchair after she's fallen from the landing. She says, it's okay now. Enjoy the nice sunshine, enjoy the breeze outside. And she walks off. And in seconds, the demon attacks again outside. So you know that it's not tethered to the house, and you know that it's not tethered to nighttime. And I like moments like that, because you're like, this thing is relentless. There is no stopping it. I was going to go into like the whole Kyle Reese monologue there from Terminator. It can't be reasoned with, and it will absolutely not stop. I like stuff like that, though. It's going back to that unpredictability, like you said.
Okay, so that really piques my interest. And I think I might actually, head out straight away to see it, because I'm really interested to know. Obviously, I'm going to have to watch the first Annabelle film before I go and see this one. But I think you have really piqued my interest, because from the sounds of it, it does sound like a genuinely well-made, well-executed horror film.
Yeah, it's fine. I had fun with it. If you like the first Conjuring film and the second one, chances are you'll probably like this, because I would build this up closer to the quality of those. Not quite, but it's getting there. Yeah. If you're really a glutton for punishment, watch the first Annabelle film before watching it, but it's really not integral. I basically explained how it all ties together at the end anyway, so you'll be fine with that.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're a huge fan of horror. I mean, you've written your own horror things before, so if anything else, I think when you watch this, there'll be moments that maybe you could take, or because that's why I like to go and see horror films. I like to see how directors have different ways of executing things, and whilst a lot of the material in this does feel slightly been there, done that, and there isn't really much new innovative things in there, it seems to be done well, and it's crafted well, and it's shot well, and there is some moments of great tension in there and atmosphere. Few too many jump scares in there, but if you're just going for like a fun, entertaining horror film, this is definitely a cut above the rest from many that I've seen in a long time.
Okay.
So I guess that'll do it for my review on
Yeah.
Annabelle Creation. Yes, so be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you thought of this movie. How would you compare it to the previous Conjuring films or the previous Annabelle film? Anything you like regarding Annabelle, please do drop us a comment. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, there'll be more trailer reactions from me. I'm actually dedicating a couple of days this week to get a whole bunch more recorded and edited, so look out for those. More movie reviews coming as well. I know that we had kind of a hiatus on those, but we've been playing catch up the last couple of days, so that's why another reason why I wanted to get this review out there. Also, this Wednesday, we're going live for a brand new episode of Battle of the Brackets, where we'll be arguing it out as to who the best Game of Thrones character is. And speaking of Game of Thrones, join us tomorrow night, where we'll be giving our review on episode 6 of season 7, Death is the Enemy. We'll be going live in the evening, but look out for times on those on our Facebook and Twitter. Links to those are in the description down below. That'll do it from us, and until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.